Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about the constructor. So the constructor, you can think of this as the special method that allows you to create the object and initialize its fields. So in this bank account class, we have defined one constructor. This constructor has two parameters. The first parameter accepts a string and the second one accepts a double. So when we call this constructor, we have to pass a string followed by a double. So let's go back here to the bank account tester class. And I'm just going to go ahead and comment out all of this other code first. And then I will create a bank account. Just name it A1. But this one, I will call the constructor, but I will only pass to it a string. So this is going to give me an error because I'm trying to call the constructor and I'm only giving it one argument when it is expecting two arguments here. So let me just save this and let's test this out. So I will compile it first, javac**.java. So it gives me an error. So constructor bank account in class bank account cannot be applied to given types. The reason for that being the actual and formal argument lists differ in length. So I have my formal argument list here, which has a length of 2. But the actual arguments that I am passing here only has a length of 1. So this gives us an error. Next, let's try and pass to it a string and a double, but let's go ahead and invert it. So I'll pass 1000 first, followed by an account name. So let's see what happens here. So let's save this. And then I will compile it. So in this case, incompatible types. Int cannot be converted to a string in this case. Okay. So Java is not going to implicitly convert this into a string in this case. So it gives me an error. So if I do not follow the types, that's going to give me an error as well. So if, for example, I type a boolean here, true, that's going to give an error as well. Okay, so I have to make sure that I follow the parameter list here. So string followed by a double. Now, there are some exceptions. So this one is going to be accepted. So an integer is going to be accepted as an argument for a parameter of the double type. So this is because they're both numbers and an integer has fewer information than a double, so it's going to fit in here. However, if this were an int, if you change this into an int, so let's say we decided to make balance an integer instead, and then we tried to pass a double to it. So this is going to give us an error. So let's save this first, all of these files. Let's compile. There. So in this case, incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from double to int. So we're going to lose some information in here because we have a double and we're trying to fit it inside an integer parameter. All right. So an integer being stored in a variable for a double is fine, but not the other way around. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to try this other thing next. What if I remove all of the arguments here, and then I remove the constructor altogether as well? So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save this as well. So what's going to happen here? So let's go ahead and compile the code. So as you can see, I don't get any errors. So this actually did not cause an error. So what happens here is if you don't explicitly define a constructor, there is going to be a default constructor that is available. So it is going to be a constructor that accepts no arguments. So if you don't explicitly specify your own constructor, you can think of it as Java provides a default constructor for you for this specific class that you've created. And that default constructor is not going to have any parameters. So this is why we're able to do this. So we removed the constructor. So we sort of default to that default constructor with no arguments. Now the next question here is, what values do these fields have now? So what happens here is these fields, because we did not specify any values here and we're not passing any arguments to the constructor, and we don't have a constructor to initialize those values, they're going to use the default values. So if it's a double, the default value is going to be 0.0. If it's a string, the default value is going to be null. So if we try to print out those values using the getter methods, so we'll say a1 dot get account name. So don't forget the parentheses after it, and then the closing parentheses for the print line statement. And then let's go ahead and print out the balance as well. So let's go ahead and compile this, and then let's run it. Java bank account tester. So the default value for a string, if you don't initialize it with 1, will be null. And then for a double, it will be 0.0. Now, what if you wanted them to actually have values other than these default ones? So one option is to assign the value directly here. So in this case, every time we make a new bank account, so it's going to make one, and then the initial value for the balance is always going to be 1,000. So you can assign the values here, or you can go ahead and actually explicitly define a default constructor, meaning one with no parameters. So we can explicitly define one. So public bank account, so the name of the class, followed by parentheses with no parameters. And then let's assign the default values here. So balance is equal to, so let's give it a very large balance. So 1 million. And then for account name, let's give a name here. Let's name it sus. So kind of sus that this unknown person has 1 million. So what happens now when we run this, so account name is going to be sus, and then get balance is going to be 1 million. So every time you make a new bank account object, so let's make another one here, a2, then print a2.getAccountName, a2.getBalance. So we're going to make 2 different instances here, 2 unique bank account classes, each with their own identity. However, both of them are going to have the same account name and the same balance. So that's because that's effectively what we've specified as the default now. So every time we make a bank account, we don't pass any arguments to it, and the balance is automatically just going to be 1 million, and the account name is going to be sus. So let's save all of these files, and then let's compile and run it again. All right, yeah. So both bank accounts happen to have the same account name in the get balance. But again, they're two different bank accounts. So this is A1. Well, this is a bank account that we are referring to as A1 within the main method. And then this is another bank account that we are referring to as A2 within this main method. So two different bank accounts. So inside the memory of your computer, you'll have two different bank accounts somewhere in there because we've created two different ones. All right. So this is your default constructor. It is the constructor without parameters. You can actually go ahead and make more than one constructor. So I could actually have this default constructor and also have the other one that allows me to pass an account name and a balance. So account name is equal to N and balance is equal to B. Okay. And I could actually define more than two. So I could define one where I just passed with a double. And then for account name, this one's going to be named sus as well. So now I have three. So we have the default one, which doesn't take any arguments and gives these default values to the fields. We have another one that takes two arguments, a string and a double, and assigns those to the fields. The values of those get assigned to the fields. And then we have this third one, which only accepts a double. So this one assigns sus to the account name field and then assigns the value of B, whatever that is, to the balance field. So now we can go ahead and call these constructors and then just automatically pass the arguments to them. So not this one. So let me just copy this. So this one's going to be A3. And then let's pass to it a value for N and then a value for B. So this one is automatically going to match with this constructor. So Java's going to see that, okay, this is a string and this is a number, so it's going to fit in here. So this is going to get called. And then we could go ahead and make another one. And this time, let's just go ahead and pass to it a double. So let's give this one 3 million, even more sus now. So this one is automatically going to call this one because this is the matching constructor. So we've got a number here, which is going to fit in here. Or, you know, just to be more specific, let's go ahead and make it an actual double. So this one is going to match with this constructor because we're passing an argument that is of the double data type. And this one is the constructor that actually has the parameter that can accept that double. So if we print this one out, the account name is going to be sus, but the balance is going to be this one, 3,000,000.01. So let's go ahead and save these. Okay, and then let's run it. Well, compile and then run. Compile and then run. So we've got A1, right? So the one that calls the default constructor. A2 calls the default constructor as well. And then we've got this one that called the other constructor that accepts a string and a double. So this one. So this one corresponds to this one. So Alice is the account name, and then 3,000 is the balance. And then finally, we've got this one, which corresponds to this one. So we only passed a balance. So balance is 3,000,000.01, but the account name is the one here where we specify sus. So you can specify more than one constructor. So why would you want to do this? So this is if you'd like to be able to have different ways of instantiating an object. So sometimes maybe in your program, you're just, okay, let's give an option where we just give the amount for the balance and then just automatically make the account name sus. So seems not very useful in this case because this is just a very contrived and also just a very basic program. The point of which is for us to just be able to understand these concepts. But if you can think of a more complex program, then you might end up with situations where you want different ways of instantiating an object. So Java gives you that option of defining multiple constructors. So the important thing here is that the constructors have different parameter lists. So if I try and make another one that also has a string and a double, okay, so it doesn't matter if I name this X and if I name this one Y. So they might have different parameter names, but the data types are the same. So there's no way for Java to resolve this. So if I call bank account Alice a string and 3000 a number, which one is Java going to use here? This one or this one? So this instead is going to give us an error. So if we try to compile this, so we do get an error in this case. Oh, so let's see. Actually, let me change this first because it's giving me an error based on the fact that there is no symbol here named B. So we just change this, and then let's run it and let's compile it. All right. Okay. So it says here, constructor bank account string double is already defined in class bank account. So it sees line 18 and then says, oh, hey, wait a minute, but you already defined one. It's the previous one here. The previous one already accepts a string and a double. So you end up getting this error here. So you can flip it. I guess you can just say double Y, or you can even use the same name because again, these are parameters. So the scope is just within this method. So you can say double B string N, and then account name is equal to N and balance is equal to B. So this one is fine. You have two constructors here and then the parameter list is different. So the order in this case is different. They may both be asking for a string and a double, but this one is asking for a string first and then a double. This one is asking for a double first and then a string. So this one is not going to be a problem. So if we compile this, so no errors. So now if you want to call this constructor, so we would just go ahead and say bank account, same this one, A5. And then we would pass the double argument first, and then the name. So A5, A5. So this one is going to match with this one, the one that first accepts the double and then accepts the string. Okay, so let's run this. Let's compile it and run it. Okay, so there. So that would be the last one here. So bank account A5, new bank account, which passes a double and then a string. So it gives us this one. All right. So you can make more than one constructor. You can explicitly define a default one. So when we say default, it is the constructor that has no parameters. If you don't define any constructor, then Java will implicitly make a default constructor for you, and it will just initialize the fields with the default values. So if we do not make any constructor, so if we erase all of these, we're going to have an implicit default constructor with no parameters. So when we make a new bank account object, it's just going to have the default values for these fields. So for the double, it's going to be 0.0, and for any string, it's going to be null. But you can explicitly define a default constructor if you wish. So just make one and then initialize the fields to whatever values you'd like. And then you could make more than one constructor. Additionally, you could add multiple constructors as well. So all constructors will have the name of the class, but the parameter list needs to be different. So we've got this one that has a string and a double for the parameters. This one has a double and a string. Okay, so the order of the data types is what matters here. All right, so that's it for this lesson.